Do, 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 do. Oh, my goodness. There you are. Thank you so much for stopping by. I wanted to share a little bit of, I don't know, a mess I'm up to that is a little smaller. I tend to unpack these sort of giant little toys, but it's early, and this particular version isn't overly burdened. But there's a lot going on. So if you're into it, let me give you a taste of a stack. BlazorWasm's in here, right? But it's certainly not the centerpiece. There's a lot to building software, and BlazorWasm's just a UI choice. And even that, right? My BlazorWasm preloads in my Blazor server that's wrapped by my Maui. Like it's all deployment choices. All right. So at the top of the world, we do have a sense of some core business libraries, some core business behaviors. In this case, we're going to take a look at, mostly the Discord bots sort of lane. And we come into our core, and at the heart of the beast, we find our business logic. And so way down here, you might think of these as database tables. They aren't at this point. There's no database stuff anywhere around here. There are some link queries that could be reused as we move to the infrastructure layer. There's some events that can be raised as things take place. This is your domain, right? And so at the heart of our domain is this idea of our business logic. As we leave the business logic and move towards the infrastructure, where we might find something like your entity framework or some flat files or some, all sorts of things may come into play at the infrastructure layer. This is where persistence begins to occur, right? Everything in that previous layer was about managing memory and managing information in memory and operating on information in memory. The whole world is in memory. And now that we move to infrastructure, what do we want to remember when the lights turn out? And so what parts of our application really only exist to help get information into and out of memory in a wider sense, right? If the base domain. And so while we're wrapping, introducing an amount of these to entity framework, right? Even though they are all introduced into framework, the ones you want to persist, the idea of the repository is filtered down to only aggregate roots. So basically, pretty clear. We're saying up here, these, I've given little underscores. Sorry, you see, I abuse the English letters so that I can force my sorts. But we see here, these are aggregate roots. These are entry points into the domain that can be used to manipulate all the other pieces of the domain. You would never, okay, air quotes, you're not going to manipulate these directly. You're only going to talk to these three and ask them politely to do things. And we'll see down here, we have servers, so we can add aliases. And so, you're asking your business logic politely to do things. All right, cool. So we have a new framework. We'll keep cruising. Before we leave this layer, we also want to be able to talk to it. We want to be able to sort of tickle it and say, hey, go load this or query this or think about that or add this or do the other. And so we also define those while we're here. What are your commands and queries? Now, this is part of a CQRS pattern, but which originally was about separating your reads and your writes, right? The way this is implemented, if I came back later and decided, hey, I'm Twitter and I need to write data impossibly fast, and that's that. I can never not write data. I don't care how long it takes to read. I want to optimize for writes only. So that's an event database. And they're awful, but they do their jobs really well. And so you might write to an event database that may kick off some processes that um, begin to move that information over to more slower database systems, such as your RDBMS or SQL or something like this. And then your reads may actually read from a SQL database, right? You might write to an event database, and then you have eventual consistency over to a SQL database where you do your reads. We're not separating it like that, just know it's possible. We're using the pattern to just help keep, again, a very clean and distinct conversation in our stack. So here are the things, the commands. And again, these are boring. These are in-memory objects, right? It's basically a POCO. Get rid of that and call it a POCO. Now, Queries, same idea. We're just defining the shape of information in memory and how we're going to talk to ourselves and move things around. And because they're named types, we can then add a little bit of plumbing logic. We'll look at some of that here in a minute. So now that you have commands and queries, what do you want to do with them? And so we can register these handlers. This is mediator. And you're just telling mediator, hey, if you're ever requested one of these things, looking for one of these things, then I can help you out. And this is the code I'd like you to execute to handle that command or that query if you happen to see one, right? Very clean. We move back to those specs we were looking at a minute ago. So this layer, the infrastructure says, yeah, I don't know, but I bet if I use the specification provided to me and I hand them back what it wants, then I could ask the repository to go get that, and away we go. Right? Very clean interaction with information, whether it's in a database or in memory, starts to become not as interesting or important. We can change databases, we can point to a whole different structure, we can do all sorts of interesting things later if we do a good job at this now. Okay, so my infrastructure, still, those of you that might be a little newer on your journey here, we've only created libraries. This created a DLL. This creates a DLL. And you can kind of think of these libraries or DLLs as the potential of work, but they can't really do work themselves. Someone has to use them to do things. We're describing in a healthy way the potential of work. All right, so we're going to keep moving. The next place this sort of a thing might surface really would be your controller layer. And I'll come back to common in a minute. But let's just dive right over here and get something satisfying. Here we have a query, right? Query command. And we're telling mediator, please process this query. We registered a query handler for this. So mediator's happy to do that. Return the result. And here we have mapper. And we're simply mapping the Discord server record that has come back into memory from Entity Framework or whatnot. And we're mapping it back to a view model version of the same. At the beginning of the project, these are going to look pretty similar to each other, but that won't hold true over time. The idea of a view model, or the idea here, is to really think about the shape of information as you return it on your API across the wire, one of your heaviest moments, right? One of the biggest moments we begin our optimization to give our users a nice experience. But the information we're going to return on that API needs to be small and specific. It needs to not give away secrets or tell things, sometimes you don't want keys or IDs out there. Often the shape of the information is very different. Maybe you need several tables, air quotes. Maybe you need several sort of thought moments pivoted together. Maybe you want to shape the return record coming off that API to exactly the information it should be so that the UI has a really easy time go ahead and just smashing it forward. You want to remove all the weirdness, remove everything you can right here, and make sure we're returning across that wire exactly what the view can make the most use of. And when possible, flatten things out a little bit, right? Don't necessarily make your view go nesty, nesty, nesty. It's pretty cheap and easy today to nest in it, right? So it's not a big deal, but something to think about. Can you flatten your UI, your view model out just a little bit and help it map to what the UI or the caller really, really wants and expects? Another thing I really like about Mapper, you're going to run into this situation all the time, and now you have an easy answer. You have so many little easy answers when we're done. But if I come up here to where I'm storing my auto maps, my little auto mapper profiles, what we're basically saying is take this idea of Discord game alias, whatever this class is, and create a map to the view model or whatever your second class is. In this case, we've asked for both directions, so map that way and this way. I can convert back and forth between the two now. And all this is going to do, there's a lot of configuration you can add here. You can make these absolutely phenomenally clever. But just in its simple, again, at the beginning, a lot of these things start very, very simple, and then they grow just a little bit. But it's going to, in its mapping, say, this could be person and animal. And it's going to say, okay, well, they both have a name, so that's part of the map. They both have a date of birth, that's part of the map. And forevermore, you can now cast between these two object types, or you can ask Mapper to map between these two object types for you. And you won't ever again have to type, person dot name. Wow, I can't just make stuff up. Come on, help me out, robot. Equals, animal dot name. So this is really what we're getting for free, and then we can do more complicated things. If we were to say animal name, maybe we map this a little funky so these aren't so easily gleaned, then we would just go in here and describe that mapping. You can do calculations, you do all sorts of stuff. So super, 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 super handy. Love Mapper. So back to our controller. Maybe not open. We've simply said mediator, handle the query, take the result, mapper, turn it into a list of view model in this case. And you'll find this way most of our controllers are very, very, very thin, 2 to 3 lines on average each. And the implementation layer, the business logic and all that goes into satisfying that code is now also really, really clean and tidy. Your experience might be to write a lot of that here, right? Maybe you're exposing your um, appdb context here in some way, and you're iterating through tables. Let's not do that. All right, so we saw a little bit of common. We have our view models in common. We have our auto maps in common. But we have a little bit of some request objects in common, kind of deciding on some things here. Our validators, common. Part of common, other than just seeing what all could be removed from API and left out, is the Blazor WASM itself doesn't like binding to a little carryover piece of the heart of these API controllers that still has some root and ancestry and MVC, something or another. I don't know, deep in the heart. Last time I tried, anyway, I couldn't just directly take any project I wanted and import it into Blazor. In this case, I was able to abstract into API common the things that Blazor needed to know about, that the API knew about, and both of them benefit. All right, quick walk before we move past this sort of midline. We created, first it started in kernel. That ends up a library. It's very boring. Mostly just gives us our base entity and stuff. Then we moved into core business logic. That's another library. So these DLLs would publish to NuGet, or a local NuGet, or a private NuGet, or a public NuGet, or some other mechanism. But they just publish as dependencies, and you could bring these back into your projects with those same package statements you do any other third-party dependency. All right, so that those two published as libraries. We came into infrastructure, that publishes a library. API common publishes a library, and then API listens on an endpoint, or do a little work and make it a sleepy endpoint, or whatever. At this point, you've got this little, I don't know, microservice. Kind of partly depends on how you deploy it and how you use it and what you do with it. But the potential is here to easily craft many microservices that can talk to each other and begin to have some communication bus in between. And you'll see we even have some of that plumbed up. So super cool. So you can hold this in your hand, deploy this thing. It uses these things. Ta-da! We're now listening as a controller on an API endpoint. And we can see that actually over here, right? So come over here and check out these Discord servers. And we find, it's just an exact match. There we go. So it's just one I happen to know exists in the database. Super cool. All right. So our controller ends, that journey. We have data. It's exposed. We can talk to it. We can politely ask it to do things. We can raise internal domain events. Everything we need is dealt with up there. Enter Blazor. From the perspective of this critter, I actually build out again, libraries. So these cook down to what are called Razor class libraries. The others were DLLs, just dynamically linked libraries. I don't know what else to call them. They've been with us since forever. And these are Razor class libraries, RCLs. They effectively publish the same. They can all go to NuGet repos. They can all come back in through package statements, import statements, and are first-class citizens. So they make us very happy. Now you're going to notice this module is just pretty tiny and only cares about itself. It has no layout. It has no main, real behavior. We have no index. There's no root page, these kinds of things. But instead, this is meant to be part of a larger system. This is going to be lazy loaded, in fact. It's up to you. The whole design here is to have some extreme lazy loading. But we have a lazy Blazor module, a lazy Blazor admin module, and then we have service and service loader, so that when we are creating these lazy loaded critters, we are also able to give them an opportunity to participate in our dependency injection container and do things like share HTTP client and whatever other services you would like to see instantiated or shoved into the dependency injection or pulled from the dependency injection container, the two projects need to high five. So there's a firm dependency between the Blazor client and the service loader. The service loader has the dependency on the service. The module and admin have dependencies on the service. Blazor client has a dependency on the service loader, which has a dependency on the service. Everybody's happy. But there's no dependency directly from the Blazor client to the Blazor module or Blazor module admin. Right? It doesn't know these things exist. They are only added dynamically at runtime, stream, lazy loaded, and super fun. Cool. All right. So let's leave this for. Oh, let me show you one more trick before we leave that. In the modules, if we were to look at something like this, right? So we're way out here in an extreme lazy loaded module that may or may not, right? Depends on what's going on, whether we're even going to load it. We've done our client, we've got our cool little relationship back to the main Blazor site, whatever that would be, right? Doesn't actually know or care as long as they all play along. And so this was wicked. All right, let me go slow. You want to lazy load a module, and then you want that module to have an opportunity to change content back up in the main layout, which we haven't even looked at yet. But just push pin that thought, okay? And we'll see these two show up. All right. So let's collapse this. Let's go away and kind of forget this stuff even exists because it's going to be all lazy from here. We're going to come down here to the Blazor client. A little more going on. Still void of a few concepts. There's no layout pages in here, for instance. Those live up here in client common. Another dependency, another Razor class library, another deployable that can be used by other critters, the potential of work. And so in client common, this is actually where I have things like different layouts that can be set and used throughout the application. And if we look, we're going to find these calls right here. And we're going to focus on these last two, module settings and module admin settings for a minute. And we see we have module settings, right? But it's actually the rendering of whatever layout service has for render fragment content of module settings. Okay, keep going. So if we now look for in the layout service itself, we're simply maintaining these fragments. And anytime a sub application would call to it, right now it just replaces it. We may do different fun things, but kind of a wicked moment. Pretty fun for sure. And so this set module settings turns into way out here. It takes its content on render. Let's see, where is. So as long as it has content, then we're going to take whatever's in the child nodes, so to speak. So whatever's shoved into this, right? Super fun. All right, sorry, a little deep. Now, you can see some of this playing out at right. If we get a little refresh on here. All right, we got the um, preloader, and then we had our nav loader, and we had some other lazy stuff going on here. A little CSS goofiness. Get logged in. More UI stuff, just making things ugly before we make them not ugly. I'll show you more of that. Got a little Discord going on, so I'll use it. Thank you for logging in. Let's give ourselves a quick opportunity to navigate. And this will be our Discord servers. Nice dev experience. Got that auto refresh, auto recompile. Life's good. Click the nav. And we're going to notice only when we asked for it. Let's do that one more time. Nice fresh. Click the nav. Last possible minute. We actually got the Blazor module and Blazor module admin lazy loaded, injected, containerized. Oh, and then they got to play along. Oh, I love this stuff. It's so hot. All right, cool. So, what did we miss? What more do you want to know about? We can go in any direction and look deeper and explore further together these concepts and how you do stuff, where you'd put it. We have Signal R server, and so we can do real-time pub sub. Even though we're deployed as a BlazorWasm client, I still like reaching back from the client and initiating and participating in that Signal R behavior. Got a nice little kind of enterprise monolithic microservice-y, nice choices can be made. It's easily containerized, thrown into Docker. Got all these other little goofy things going on to uh, live running listeners for Discord interactions and some amount of automated backend services for time-based, sort of server stimulated interactions, and server-side preloaders and Maui wrappers and console apps, right? You could now make a console app and just use all this stuff, the same stuff. Ugh, too fun. I guess before we bail, final thing we'll look at, since we didn't really do much for the UI folks in the room, let's consider, let's clap this whole world. If we want to impact, like all this red, right, all this obnoxious red, the Blazor client itself's actually in charge, so the layout pages and all of those just play along. If we look at the top of our app, pretty uninspired, huh? We'll see the theme provider, dialog, and snack bar is here. The selected mud theme is dealt with here, and I've just hard-coded. I'm not letting us pick and choose at the moment. Wherever I've got that set, yeah, let's go into mud static default. So if we look, again, that's provided by the client. So in a sense, you could have multiple clients just recompose this whole world and do different things with it. More to think about. And then we're just using, Mud's overall theme engine. And so that plugs in nicely here where we want it to. You should be hopefully familiar with these, at least conceptually, they're all pretty straightforward. I am in VS Code, right? Everything you see me doing, tests, everything I would want to do, I can do in VS Code. And, um, goofy stuff like this, right? These are just these extensions. As you continue to grow your list of extensions, you're going to get all these fun behaviors, right? So here's color highlight, and I could actually let it load. And if it were happy, you can actually choose and change the color and stuff using a little wheel. We could tap into typography, piece by piece by piece. What's body one? What's body two? What's H? Right? All of these. That way, when we're in code, you have this beautiful palette from which to compose. I am not, I am everything but a UI guy. So, despite my fantastic palette, my composition still struggles. Send help. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful world here. Now we get isolated CSS. So if we're way down in some moment and we say all the anchor tags are blue, that doesn't bleed out anymore. It would only affect the anchor tags within the isolation of that particular moment. And if you do want something at a higher order, then I have this sort of SaaS world growing. And so through SaaS or SCSS and the use of variables and mixins, you can play along and continue to grow it to the same and override some of those things as you see fit. And then this whole world, anywhere, you drop a SCSS page, that'll cook up a CSS page that matches the Razor page so the engine can pull it in and make good use of it. Super fun. Oh, yeah, I don't have anything else going on. I got these fun little goofy animations. Got, more to build. It's very early. The fact that I can come in and I think I deleted somewhere in here is actually a screen we can click. It's not what we want. What else did we have? Here we go. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great. Oh, we got told no. Why did we get told no? 401. Authentication header required, not provided. I appear to be logged in. I don't know. More. let me turn that off real quick so you can actually see a final thing happening. I will come back to that. Continue growing things here. So technically, do do do. That auto recompiled, auto redeployed, auto reran, and we just had to wait a moment and click go. And so here we see, right, Discord server, create, blah, 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 blah. Following that all the way back down on our way out. Let's Blazor client first, and then we'll come right back here. So if we work our way down here, it's actually, get this router, right, which was delivered to us here. And because we hit that router, we loaded Blazor module and admin. All right. In this page, other than our settings content stuff, we also have some amount of select a server. I'm on the wrong page. All right, that's on me. So we come in, we say, hey, we toss in this participate client component. So if we look down here in shared, participate client component, says hello, yes, yes, isn't life good? Create new server creates a request and asks the client, which we've injected. So we've injected our Discord server HTTP client factory. We've asked our factory to give us a client. We've asked the client to create a Discord server async. If we come up here, we'll see those pieces. We were talking about them earlier, the service and loader. So we have a Discord server HTTP client factory. It knows how to return a new client based on whatever the dependency injection container has provided for the HTTP client factory using a named instance. All right. So it requires that we've bootstrapped our dependency injection container a little bit. This cat needs to play along. We also see a Discord server's HTTP client, get Discord server, get list, create Discord server async. I think that's the one we were just playing with. Create Discord server async, right? So it accepts the request, returns the result. In the middle, it's going to use, yeah, need to make my decisions here. It works because of the loose mapping, and I'm not sure I love it. It's a bit haunting. At left, I've left things using kind of a request response pattern. At right, I've mapped directly to that command query. I'm going to not do that. I think I'm going to keep the request response pattern, or at least the request pattern. I don't know about the response pattern, and until it comes up. And anyway, it doesn't matter. So here we're seeing take that HTTP client, which was injected from the, again, from the dependency injection container. Actually, no, in this case, we are pulling out of the container and then using it to instantiate that last file we were looking at. All right, finally, we post this JSON async. We ask, and this is why the request cats live on, right? Is I really like keeping this idea of building routes, and that route's boring. There's a more interesting route here, right? We can, let's go here, right? We can deal with whatever it takes to get to this endpoint. The request knows how to find its endpoint, so to speak. And then through build route, we can bring that back into our calling code. In this case, it's got body content, so the route is boring, just an API endpoint. And then we can pass that post body content and ultimately pull back a map of Discord server view model. So we're back down here in our Blazor code, right? The only stuff that's really in BlazorWasm says, oh, now I've got a request. Can I please have, the answer to my woes? I like it. It feels nice. It's readable. If I quit naming pages wrong. All right, super cool. So that got us into, well, before we leave this file, how did any of that even get stood up? It's way down here. I bet lazy services is dealing with that. Here we go. So registering lazy modules is going to get us that named HTTP client that we saw the other code relied on. We're adding the client factory to our dependency injection container because remember the Blazor client does have a relationship to that library, which is super tiny, right? Completely tiny compared to the rest of that Blazor client it doesn't have a relationship to. Add Discord bot service factory to the dependency injection container, and then now that the container's got some things going on, add these Discord bot services as per right? We're back up here in our service loader. So this service loader gets a brief moment to play along as well. Inject its services. All right. And that's about it, right? At that point, we are able to ask and play along with these lazy services. Really the magic lives here as long as things get loaded correctly and bootstrapped correctly. And this is kind of that moment they get that extreme lazy load. But what a beautiful server side hit right before your client gets any of your precious code. You have this last opportunity to say, did they pay their bill? Do they deserve this? Is their security right? Like so many wonderful questions we've never been able to ask just ahead of delivering pieces of our TypeScript, JavaScript into the client browser where they get all of our code and can technically easily take it apart and look at it. Super cool. So that puts us back to our controller, right? That now knows how to compose and hit this endpoint, which hits mediator. Mm. Ah, getting ready to do something with it. But take that add command and send it to mediator. So in this case, toying with this idea, I don't know that I like exposing and mapping the command query directly on the API endpoint. I think I'm going to flip all of these to use, which I imagine this one is. Just try different things and see what you like best. But in this case, I think they should. I don't know. These also use queries. Hmm. Well, my other project, I do have those request objects, and I believe they live on. Maybe they become um, records. There's new data types in C Sharp and some of these other things to explore, but we'll step past that for the moment, right? We map to the command, in this case, from the body of the request directly. We've tossed this over to mediator. We brought the result, mapped it back. When we took Discord server add command to our infrastructure layer through mediator, then we moved into Discord server add command handler. We've created a server, added it to the repository. Discord servers are a root, so we can do that. And that's kind of it. There's nothing up here. We have the idea of the Discord server, right? It's pretty boring, pretty small, I guess, in my mind when you kind of get it all dealt with and all the lovely pieces in play. Then it reads like a book. It becomes this lovely story and these separate concerns and these separate mannerisms and conversations to address the different important flow within your application stack and make it lovely to work with, a lot of fun to share with others and work together and build something truly amazing. I hope there's been something in there for you. Let me know. What do you want to go deeper on? You want to keep up with the project? I don't know what I'm building here. I just like building stuff, so I'm going to keep building. And we'll maybe look deeper at Signal R, some of that real-time pub sub. High five. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Cheers. Dun, 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 dun.